basically while you were in college and while you were up here, just playing the circuit around here.
Yeah.
Harrisburg? Okay.
Yeah.
When you moved to Philly, how did you connect to the Philly musicians, or were you recommended to somebody, or go to a jam session?
Well, how did I okay. It was like a hiatus. I mean, well, I'll try to go through a few progressions there. I was with that band, the Fugitives, for about 2.5 years, up till the 68 maybe. And then, at the urging of my wife at that time, you got to kind of mitigate this stuff a little bit, because it was every weekend, and it was down to Malaga, New Jersey, and all these crazy places, getting home at 5 in the morning. So I started playing with a bunch of guys in Delaware County, and got in with the cats in the Chester local, and a couple of good piano players around there. Huey Hinkson was a great piano player, like along the lines of Art Tatum. But I got in with Ralph Jones, and I don't know if you know who Ralph Jones was. He was Bill Haley and the Comets drummer from 56 to 62. And I got playing with him a lot. We had a band called The Neighbors that played at the Crestmore Inn on Monday nights, and then Ralph Jones put together a trio, and I brought in Rick Copes, who I had met. He's a piano player. I brought him in. I met him in a rehearsal band, Al Raymond, Al Leopold, Al Leopold's rehearsal band.
Yeah, that's the connection. We got all these stuff.
Do you?
Yeah.
Al Leopold and Hal Schiff. They had a rehearsal band in Wilmington. So I knew Rick from that, so I brought Rick in. And we were in the Crestmore for, I don't know how long it was, probably 6 months. And then Rick had to go in the National Guard, and that broke that up. So, but at any rate, I was with Chester, like Chester guys, more so than Philly guys.
That's a different local
than Philly?
Than 274 in Philly?
Oh yeah, it's a different local. It's 484, I think.
Okay.
Reading's 135, Chester's 484.
Okay.
I was a member of the Chester local, and they used to look out for you up until the mid-70s, and then everything changed. But at any rate, I was with the Delaware County guys, and yeah, I would try to, I mean, I remember driving home from gigs with the Fugitives where I stopped off at a place on Baltimore Avenue called Breakfast and Jazz. Did you ever hear of that place? On Baltimore Avenue. So, I mean, I was always trying, whenever I could, to be involved in the jazz scene, but it was difficult. There were places down, I saw Jack McDuff at a place called the Stardust that was right off where the Conchester goes off of I-95 there, right at Chester. But then Rick Copes and I put a group together in about 1970, and I was with them, and some pictures there. I was with them from 1970 to almost until I had Ortlieb's, to 86. We were a trio for 10 years, and then our drummer moved to Florida. Frank Pederuto, he moved to Florida, and then we became a quartet for another 7 years.
Okay, now let's get into the Ortlieb's thing.
So yeah, to answer the second part of your question,
okay.
How did I get involved with jazz in Philadelphia? I got divorced in about 1983, and of course I was always interested in jazz, but now it became a little bit more possible to go out. So I saw a picture in the paper of John Simon at Gert's Lounge. And I could just tell by the picture, like, this is the kind of stuff I can relate to. So I went into Gert's. The first time I went in, this would probably be about late 83 or early 84.
That's when I was going into Gert's.
Yeah, and I didn't even take my sax the first time, but I scoped the scene. So then the next time I went to the Monday night jam session, and I sat in like everybody does, And John Simon said to me, he says, "Wow, I can hear Arnett Cobb in your playing." And I'm like, oh my God, somebody actually knows what's going on. They can, because I used to have these people say, "Oh, I play like Jerry Mulligan." I don't play like Jerry Mulligan. Just because I'm a tall white guy, Or you sound like Stan Getz. Well, I love Stan Getz, but I don't sound like, I don't. So the John Simon, that's the thing. So then he used to get me to sub for him. I would sub for him, and Glennie Goodone would sub, John Swana would sub, and Tony DeSantis. We were the four guys that would sub for John, especially when he had got an early happy hour gig over at the Four Seasons, and he would have us come in and play for an hour, the first hour. But so that was what sort of got me more involved in the jazz scene. And of course, I would go to the other places too. I would go to Natalie's. I would go to LG's Blue Note. I would go up to Slim Cooper's. Those were, I guess, maybe one other place.
Okay, well now we got your intro into that.
The milieu, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay, what made you decide to open a jazz club to begin with? I mean, when did you start thinking?
Okay, this is I hope you can bear with me, because this is
I'll bear with you.
this is a story with multiple threads.
That's all right.
So I'll start way back at the beginning. That, you know, of course, you always have in the back of your mind, it'd be cool to have a club, where you could have the music out front. But a year or two after I had been with Richard's Night Riders, this guy, the same sax player that I replaced, he called me up, said, "Hey Pete, do you know that Coleman Hawkins is going to be at Pushnick's next week?" Now, Pushnick's was another one of those clubs that ran music all 6 nights a week. So Coleman Hawkins was going to be at Pushnick's in Lebanon the following week. So I dragged Betty, my wife, out there, and we go see Coleman Hawkins. So, like the young, naive guy that I was, I somehow got up the chutzpah to go over, and he played his first set, and I went over and said, "Mr. Hawkins, can I talk to you?" So he sits down. By the way, I was shocked when I saw him, because I had all the album covers, and he looked vibrant and healthy, and by then, that was the winter of '65 into '66. I think it was probably early '66, maybe February, maybe January. And he had aged tremendously. I mean, I was heartbroken, But I talked to him, and I asked him all the usual stupid questions, like, "How long have you been playing a metal mouthpiece?" Well, I thought they were relatively new at that time, and he says, "Oh, ever since like 20s or 30s." I'm like, "Okay, dumb me, And I talked to him about his records, the ones I loved, and he, Coleman Hawkins meets Duke Ellington, or vice versa, and Today and Now, and he told me Today and Now was his favorite album. I'm like, he loved his rhythms. Tommy Flanagan, his rhythm section at that time. By that time, Tommy Flanagan had gone with Ella, and he was using Barry Harris. I think it was Barry Harris. Anyhow, then he says to me, "Well, what's the deal?" I don't know what his exact words were. "What's the deal with this part, this area?" Meaning, I guess, Eastern Pennsylvania, this part of the country. I said, "What do you mean?" Well, he says, "How come it doesn't support?" And what he meant was marquee entertainment, marquee entertainers, stars, So I got a little bit, not defensive, but I'm like trying to, Lawson's in Harrisburg has some good stuff. When I would be playing up there at the Pueblo, we would play a matinee and shoot down to Lawson's and catch the end of the jam session. He says, "Well, who plays at Lawson's?" I said, "Well, I just saw Yusef Lateef there." And he says, "Who's Yusef Lateef?" No disrespect. "Who's Yusef Lateef?" He says, "I'm talking about the Beatles." I'm like, and later I learned that he had a way of doing things which would just like completely throw you off, But I always remember, like, he was. I mean, there was some kind of worldly wisdom behind what he was saying. First of all, the Beatles had just become a thing, because by '66 they had Revolver and Rubber Soul out, and shortly would have, Sgt. Pepper, and it was so. Did he know that? I have a feeling he maybe did, but it was also about marquee value, and so that stuck with me. So then the next thing, several years later, now I'm in 1969, so that was '66. Oh, and he told me, whenever you're in New York, Oh, and I saw him one. Excuse me. I did see him one more time down at the Laurel Jazz Festival in the summer of '67. It was wonderful. It was great then. So then, May of '69, I'm working for Sun Oil now for a couple of years, you know, and once or twice a year they'd send these little things. Do you want to go to a self-improvement seminar? Well, of course, I would always choose to try to get myself up to New York, you know, and go to something up there. And of course, you go to the record stores, but what are the jazz clubs and who's playing where? And so this was the second time I got up to New York. I got up there once in '68 too. So I'm up there in May of '69, and I'm asking all over town, is Coleman Hawkins in town? Is he playing anywhere? Is there anywhere I can go see him? Nobody knows anything, of course. Nobody knows where he's at. So I was up there with another guy. We were going to this seminar called Database Management and Design. So I don't know which night it was, Tuesday night or Wednesday night. We go out and we fall into this place over on the east side. I don't know, Lower East Side, you know, or on 3rd Avenue maybe or something like that. And we go in there and there's a Horace Parlin Trios playing in there. And as I told Jason, the room in retrospect was just like Ortlieb's. We're in there. We're in there and I walk in, the bar is on your right, beautiful wood walls, the bandstand's halfway down the room, jutting out. The piano's jutting out. That's one thing that was different than Ortlieb's. You see the drummer, you see the piano player and the bass player. It was just a trio. And then the tables, they had checkerboard tablecloths, and the tables are on either side going all the way back. And it was almost the same configuration and size as Ortlieb's. So we closed that joint that night, 4 in the morning, and we got to get up for class the next morning by 8 or 9. We closed the joint. I'm drinking scotch all night long. So the next morning, I had the television set programmed to wake me up at 7 or something like that, so I could get up and get my sorry ass, you know, dressed. And the television comes on, and I hear Body and Soul playing. The version that he cut in Chicago at the Playboy Jazz Festival. And I hear this voice talking in a monotone way, and I said, son of a, he died last night. He died that very night I was looking for him. So I'm all, you know, well, as you can well imagine, I never heard a single word the guy, and, you know, I was in mourning, you know, and I bought 19 records and brought them home, much to the chagrin at home. But that always stayed in my mind. You know, there I am looking for Coleman Hawkins. But so the third part of the story is now I'm, you know, interested in finding a place, and Gert's plays into this too, which I'll get to in a minute. But I'd been talking to a real estate agent about a place that I saw advertised, Fairmount Firehouse. And when I was dating Margaret at the time, you know Margaret, and by that time, you know, we went over to look at the Fairmount Firehouse. It was a great venue, but they wanted some astronomical amount of money for it, $895 or something like that. So I said, well, thanks, but no thanks. I can't, you know, that's way out of my range. So
you're now, you have the desire.
Yeah, now I have the desire.
Going out and looking to places.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll get back into, there's another thread that ties into that, which has a lot to do with Gert's.
That's all right, keep going.
Has a lot to do with Gert's, but now I'm looking. So they called me up, it was Fox and Lazo, I remember the realtor. They called me up a little bit later about, hey, we have this place, it's for sale. The old Ortlieb's brew house. You know, it used to be part of the brewery and all this. So I'm like, and I had actually been there once, just for a Christmas party with somebody. So I meet them, walk in, and I'm like right away, this is the place. This is the place. The walls, the wood walls would give you good acoustics. It's got a warmth to it. It's big enough. A lot of the, as you well know, a lot of the sort of old row house oriented bar rooms are they're long but not as long, and they're not as wide. Like Gert's was probably only what, 11 or 12 feet wide, I'd say.
It was,
Ortlieb's was 19 feet in the front and then narrowed to 13. It was just wide enough that you could have tables, enough tables to sit there and maybe serve food, you know. So I walked in and, yeah, okay, so that started, that was in probably December of '86, after I had been going to University of the Arts for Jazz, PCPA. And that started about a 9-month-long negotiation, observation of the place to buy the place, which was excruciating.
And Northern Liberties was not thriving at that.
Well, it was somewhat yes, it was, there was some, I came to find later on that there was some speculation about some developer was going to do something to do with a big high-rise down on Delaware Avenue, which then fell apart. So I don't know, but there were some rumblings of, it was kind of a neighborhood in transition. And it was also an old, there was different ethnic group, there was a lot of Ukrainian people over in a certain part. It was a big Ukrainian church. There was the Ruba Club. That was a Russian Ukrainian something Brotherhood Association. Yeah, it was an interesting neighborhood, and there was a lot of artists there. There's Ray King right down two buildings down from me, and he was a steel and glass sculptor, and there was a lot of artisans in the neighborhood. So I thought that was encouraging, you know, kind of like a Greenwich Village, smaller version of Greenwich Village in Philly.
so how much did Ortlieb's, what did you pay to buy Ortlieb's?
So yeah, so it cost me roughly in the neighborhood of 190 to buy Ortlieb's. So what I did was, I owned my house in Springfield. I was able to do it without, because it was very expensive to get a loan to buy a restaurant. So what Margaret and I did was, I sold my house in Springfield, and I think I sold it for $164, and I owed very little on my mortgage, maybe 15. So I netted maybe 140 or 50 out of that, and then I had a little bit of stock purchase plan from Sun Oil. And so I just basically put every stinking thing I had into Ortlieb's, bought it, and got a mortgage on the house over on Randolph Street where we lived. We bought that for, I think, 84, 85, or was it I think 85 or something like that.
Now Randolph Street, that was in Philadelphia?
That was right over 2.5 blocks away, over Poplar to the west and up a half a block.
Oh, okay. So you were.
I could walk. I could walk if I wanted to.
Now, who owned the place before you? Who'd you buy it from?
Yeah, this is interesting history. You know, it had been the Ortlieb's Brewery, and so it was owned by the Ortlieb's people. So the Ortlieb's Brewery closed in 1980, and a retired police officer by the name of Jimmy Thompson bought it, and he had to put it in his own utilities and stuff because it ran off of brewery utilities. That was 80 to 83, and then a guy by the name of Jimmy DeJohn bought it in 83, and he's the one that I bought it from in 87. So he ran it for 3.5 years. Each of those other two guys ran it for about 3.5 years before me.
As a neighborhood bar?
As a neighborhood bar, a lunch trade, no dinner. One of them, I think Billy DeJohn, they used to serve, you know that little office I had? Yeah. That little tiny little, they used to serve liverwurst and onion sandwiches out of that. That was the kitchen. And one of those guys, I'm not sure which one, I think maybe Billy DeJohn moved the kitchen to the back. So, you know, before I had it. So
there was no entertainment?
No entertainment.
Yeah, prior to you?
No entertainment prior to me,
So
no.
you put the stage in?
I put the stage in. You know, we had a friend, Margaret and I had a friend, Dave Bechet, and he was a really good contractor, and he did a number of things that we had to do to upgrade the place. We put a new electrical panel in, you know, and we put that bandstand in the stage in. Yeah.
Where'd you get that big...
What, the water buffalo?
Yeah. What was the...
Well, when I took the place over, it was an old man bar, you know, and they had, I mean, there was deer, there was a fox on the wall, there was all kinds of stuff. What's the girl's name? One vocalist kind of gave me, she reminded me recently, kind of gave me a hard time about all the animals, but that stayed. I forget where.
That was from before.
That was from before.
Oh, okay. You didn't put
And Fred Miles named it Fendel. He named it Fendel, so you know it even became part of the folklore of the place, you know. Yeah, yeah.